The forgotten race. The stars over Vylar shone brightly, but no light could pierce the darkness spreading across its lands. The once flourishing cities of the Vylorans, a peaceful alien race, now lay in ruins. Smoke billowed from shattered towers as distant explosions echoed through the night. The skies were no longer theirs. An unknown enemy, merciless and relentless, had invaded their planet. Elder Zark, leader of the Vylorans, stood inside the dimly lit council chamber, his hands gripping the edge of the ancient stone table. His violet eyes flickered with desperation as he stared at the holographic display, showing the enemy forces advancing deeper into their territory. The Vylorans, known for their knowledge and culture, were no match for this brutal assault. Their defensive systems had been wiped out in mere days. "We must send another distress signal," Zark said, his voice heavy with weariness. The other council members, equally exhausted, nodded in agreement. "Perhaps this time, the Galactic Council will listen." A younger council member, Yura, shook her head. "The council abandoned us the moment this invasion began. They called us insignificant. They won't come. No one will." Her words hung in the air like a blade, cutting through the fragile hope in the room. Zark straightened his posture, his voice firm despite the pain in his heart. "We will try again. There must be someone out there willing to help." Moments later, the distress signal was sent, beaming across the galaxy. The message carried their plea for help. "To anyone who hears this, the Vyloran people are under attack. We are unarmed and facing extinction. Please, help us." Far away, on a small but resilient blue planet, the signal was picked up. On board the Resolute, a human exploration and defense ship, Captain Mara Cole leaned back in her chair as the audio played. Her crew watched her closely, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. "Another distress signal," muttered Lieutenant Harris, her second in command. "The Council has probably ignored this one too." Mara's sharp green eyes narrowed as she replayed the message. The Vyloran's voice trembled with desperation, and it struck a chord deep within her. Humanity knew what it felt like to be abandoned. Years ago, the Galactic Council had rejected humanity, labeling them too dangerous and unpredictable. Since then, Earth had been left to fend for itself. "Captain, do we respond?" Harris asked, uncertainty in his voice. Mara tapped her fingers on the armrest, her mind racing. Humanity was still rebuilding its reputation. Helping the Vylorans could be seen as reckless, but something about the way they begged for help. It reminded her of Earth's darkest days. "Yes," Mara said firmly, rising from her chair. "We respond." Harris hesitated. "The Council won't like it if we interfere." Mara turned to face her crew, her voice unwavering. "The Council doesn't care about us, and it clearly doesn't care about the Vylorans. If we don't help them, who will? Set a course for Vylar." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but they trusted their captain. The engines of the Resolute roared to life, and the ship hurtled through the darkness of space, heading straight for the dying planet. On Vylar, hope flickered like a dying ember. Zark and his people watched the skies, waiting for a miracle that seemed less likely with every passing moment. When a streak of light appeared in the atmosphere, they feared it was another enemy ship. But then, the light grew larger, and a metallic silhouette emerged. A human ship. The Vylorans whispered among themselves, their voices a mixture of confusion and fear. Zark stepped forward, his heart pounding as the ship descended, landing near their council building. The hatch opened with a hiss, and a group of humans emerged, led by a tall woman with fiery red hair. "I'm Captain Mara Cole," she said, her voice echoing across the plaza. "We received your distress signal." Zark stepped forward cautiously. "You are human." "Yes," Mara replied, her expression calm but determined. "We're here to help." The Vylorans stared at the humans, their emotions a mix of disbelief and wariness. Their experience with other species had taught them to be cautious. But these humans, outcasts from the Galactic Federation, were their only hope. "Why?" Zark asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "Why would you risk coming here? You know the Council will punish you for this." Mura's gaze hardened. "Because we know what it's like to be abandoned, and because someone has to do the right thing, even if no one else will." Her words resonated with Zark. Slowly he nodded, though doubt still lingered in his mind. "We have little to offer in return." Mara smiled faintly. "We're not here for rewards. We're here to fight." As the humans unloaded supplies and began assessing the situation, Zark watched them closely. Despite their rough and battle-hardened appearance, they moved with purpose and discipline. Mara, in particular, radiated a confidence that inspired both her crew and the Villarans who observed her. But in the distance, the enemy forces gathered, preparing for their next assault. Time was running out, and both humans and Villarans knew the battle ahead would not be easy. The stars above Vylar continued to shine, but for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity had come, and with them, the promise of a fight worth remembering. A broken alliance. The skies over Vylar crackled with tension as the humans worked tirelessly to fortify the crumbling defenses of the Villarans. The once serene city plaza had transformed into a makeshift command center. Alien and human voices echoed as plans were discussed. Supplies were distributed, and wounded were treated. But beneath the surface, mistrust lingered like a shadow. Captain Mura Cole stood near a holographic map projected onto the ground. Bright red indicators marked the enemy's positions, closing in like a tightening noose. Elder Zark watched her from a distance, his mind racing with uncertainty. The humans had responded when no one else had. But why? What was their real motive? "Captain Cole," Zark finally spoke, stepping forward. His voice, though firm, carried a tinge of hesitation. "I must ask again. Why risk your people for a race the galaxy considers insignificant?" Mara turned to him, her piercing green eyes locking with his. "Because we know what it's like to be abandoned, Elder Zark. We've lived it. And if we don't help you, then what does that say about us?" Her words carried a sincerity that shook Zark, though his doubts were not entirely dispelled. As if sensing the tension, Kale, a young Villaran soldier, approached with a message. "Elder Zark, the humans have brought advanced weaponry, far beyond anything we've seen before. They claim they can hold the enemy back, but..." He hesitated, glancing at Mara. "How do we know we can trust them?" Mara stepped closer, her voice calm but resolute. "You don't. Trust is earned, not given. But let me make one thing clear. If we wanted to harm you, we wouldn't have risked our lives to get here." Zark sighed, the weight of his people's survival pressing down on him. "Very well, Captain. For now, we will fight alongside you. But if you betray us, we will resist with everything we have." Mara nodded, understanding the precarious balance. "Fair enough. Now let's prepare for what's coming." As night fell, the first wave of enemy forces descended upon the city. Mara's crew worked seamlessly, deploying automated turrets, shields, and drones that hummed with energy. The Villarans watched in awe as the humans transformed their defenses in mere hours. But it wasn't just the technology that amazed them. It was the humans themselves. They fought with a ferocity and determination the Villarans had never seen. Mara led from the front, her sharp commands cutting through the chaos as she rallied both humans and Villarans alike. Kale found himself working alongside a human engineer named Reed, who was busy repairing a damaged turret. "How do you stay so calm?" Kale asked, his voice shaking as the sounds of battle echoed around them. Reed smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Calm. I'm terrified. But fear doesn't get the job done. Action does. Now hand me that wrench." Kale hesitated, then handed Reed the tool. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something unexpected. Admiration for these strange, fearless humans. The battle raged on for hours, but the combined forces managed to repel the enemy's first wave. As dawn broke, the city was still standing, though the cost was high. Viloran and human casualties lay side by side, a grim reminder of the stakes. In the aftermath, Zark approached Mara, his expression conflicted. Your people fought with bravery. But I must ask, how long can you keep this up? Your resources, your energy, it won't last forever. Mara's jaw tightened. We'll hold as long as we have to. But we need to work together. Fully. No more hesitation, no more mistrust. Zark's reply was cut short as a shrill alarm rang out. A scout stumbled into the command center, his face pale. The enemy. They're regrouping. And they've brought reinforcements. Mara exchanged a glance with Zark. How many? She asked. The scout swallowed hard. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They're preparing for a full-scale assault. A heavy silence fell over the room. The Villarans looked to Zark, their faces etched with fear. The humans turned to Mara, waiting for orders. For a moment, both leaders stood still, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Then Mara spoke, her voice steady and clear. We need to strike first. Zark blinked. Strike first? Against those numbers? That's suicide. Not if we play it smart, Mara countered, stepping forward. We hit their supply line, disrupt their reinforcements, and force them to spread thin. It's risky, but it's our best shot. Zark hesitated, then turned to his council. What do you think? Yira, the most skeptical of the council members, stepped forward. I don't trust them, Elder. But we have no choice. If we do nothing, we're finished. Zark looked back at Mara, his expression hardening. Very well, Captain. We'll follow your plan. But if this fails, it's on you. Mara nodded, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Don't worry. Failure isn't in our playbook. As the humans and Villarans prepared for their daring counterattack, a new sense of unity began to form, fragile but undeniable. Kale found himself standing beside Reed once more, this time readying weapons instead of repairing them. Why do you humans do this? Kale asked quietly. Risk everything for people you barely know. Reed shrugged, his grin never fading. Because we're stubborn, and because sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. Kale didn't reply, but his respect for the humans deepened. For the first time, he felt a sliver of hope, not just for his people, but for what they could achieve together. As the Resolute and its crew prepared to strike, the stars over Vyler seemed to shine just a little brighter. But in the distance, the enemy forces loomed, and the real battle was only just beginning. Humanity's first strike. The Villaran city buzzed with tense energy as humans and Villarans worked together, preparing for the daring counterattack. Makeshift war rooms filled with alien and human holograms displayed their plan. Elder Zark's unease was evident as he stood beside Captain Mara Cole, staring at the enemy supply routes highlighted in red. You're telling me you can sneak past their advanced scanners and sabotage their entire supply chain? Zark questioned, his voice carrying equal parts doubt and desperation. Mara, arms crossed and eyes locked on the map, nodded. With the right distraction, yes. My team specializes in hitting hard where it hurts the most. The question is, can your people hold their ground while we do it? Zark's pride flared, but he suppressed it. We will hold. Just don't expect us to follow you blindly into chaos. Mara smirked. Chaos is where we thrive, Elder. The plan was simple but bold. A small human Villaran strike team, led by Mara, would infiltrate the enemy's forward base under the cover of darkness. Meanwhile, Villaran soldiers, with the aid of human technology, would stage an open confrontation to draw the enemy's attention. It was risky, but it was their only chance to tip the scales. Kale, the young Villaran soldier, was among those chosen for the strike team. He stood awkwardly in the loading bay of the Resolute, watching the humans prepare. Their energy was electric, their focus razor-sharp. You look nervous, Reed, the human engineer, teased as he checked his gear. I've never done anything like this, Kale admitted. We're not trained for combat like this." Reed grinned, slapping Kale on the back. "Relax, kid. Stick with us, and you'll be fine. Just remember, don't overthink it. Trust your instincts, and if you see something scary, run faster than me." Kale couldn't help but chuckle, despite his fear. As night fell, the team launched their mission. Silent and swift, they navigated the rocky terrain leading to the enemy's base. The enemy forces were far more advanced than the Villarans, their soldiers heavily armored and their drones patrolling the skies like predatory birds. Mara led the group with calculated precision, signaling with hand gestures as they crept closer. Kale marveled at her confidence. Humans moved with a strange mix of recklessness and purpose, as though they thrived in the face of danger. Inside the enemy base, biomechanical soldiers marched in perfect formation. These creatures, a horrifying blend of metal and flesh, seemed almost indestructible. The strike team's mission was clear: plant explosive charges on their supply depot, cutting off their ammunition and fuel. Cal's hands trembled as he set the charges, guided by Reed's calm instructions. But just as they finished, a high-pitched whine pierced the air. "Movement detected," a robotic voice announced. The enemy's alarm blared, and lights flooded the base. "Move, now," Mara barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. The strike team sprinted for the exit as enemy drones swarmed overhead. Kale felt his heart pounding in his chest as explosions erupted behind them. The charges had detonated, and the enemy base was engulfed in flames, but their escape was far from guaranteed. Back at the front lines, the Villaran forces, led by Zark, held their positions. The humans had provided them with energy shields and advanced weapons, but the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. Yura, the skeptical council member, fought alongside Zark. "They won't make it back," she muttered grimly as the enemy forces pressed forward. "They will," Zark said, though he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. Suddenly, the ground shook, and a massive explosion lit up the horizon. The enemy forces hesitated, their ranks breaking formation as smoke and fire consumed their supply depot. "They did it," Zark whispered, disbelief and hope mingling in his voice. Mara and her team burst out of the enemy base, pursued by drones and biomechanical soldiers. They'd raced across the rocky terrain, dodging gunfire and explosions. Kale stumbled, his legs giving out, but Reed grabbed him and pulled him forward. "Don't stop now," Reed shouted. A drone closed in on them, its weapons locking onto the group. Mara spun around, her eyes blazing with determination. With a single, well-aimed shot, she brought it down. "Keep moving," she yelled. They reached the extraction point just as the Resolute's dropship descended, its guns blazing to cover their escape. As they boarded, Kale collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. "You did good, kid," Reed said, grinning as he patted Kale on the shoulder. Kale looked up at Mara, who stood at the edge of the dropship, watching the burning enemy base in the distance. "Is it enough?" he asked. Mara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "It's a start." Back at the Villaran Command Center, cheers erupted as the news of the successful mission spread. Zark approached Mara as she and her team returned, their uniforms singed and their faces streaked with soot. "You've given us hope," Zark said, his tone softer than before. "But the enemy will retaliate. This is far from over." Mara nodded. "I know, but now they're hurting. And now they know we're not afraid to fight back." As she spoke, the holographic map updated, showing enemy reinforcements already mobilizing. The battle was far from won, but for the first time, the Villarans felt they had a chance brought to them by the unlikeliest of allies. Kale stood in the background, watching the humans with a newfound respect. He still didn't fully understand them, but one thing was clear: humanity was unlike any race he had ever known. And in the face of overwhelming odds, they refused to give up. The stars over Vyler seemed brighter that night, but the looming shadow of the enemy reminded everyone that the fight was just beginning. The Galactic Council's betrayal. The Villarin city buzzed with an unusual energy. The successful raid on the enemy's supply depot had ignited a spark of hope, but the celebration was short-lived. The enemy forces, angered and wounded, had begun mobilizing at an alarming speed. Tensions simmered as humans and Villarins prepared for the inevitable retaliation. Captain Mara Cole stood in the war room with Elder Zark, studying the shifting red markers on the holographic map. They were running out of time. "They're regrouping faster than I anticipated," Mara said, her voice grim. "They're planning something big." Zark frowned, his violet eyes narrowing. "We've bought ourselves a moment of relief, but nothing more. These creatures, they don't retreat, and they don't bargain. Which makes them predictable," Mara countered. "But we need more intel to stay ahead of them." As if on cue, a young Villarin scout entered the room, visibly shaken. "Elder Zark, Captain Cole," he stammered, "we've intercepted a transmission." Mara's eyes snapped to the scout. "What kind of transmission?" The scout hesitated, then played the recording. The cold, robotic voice echoed through the room. "Operation Eradicate proceeding as planned. Galactic Council authorization confirmed. Neutralize all resistance." The room fell silent. Zark's hands tightened into fists. "The Galactic Council. What do they have to do with this?" Mara's face darkened. "They're behind this. They're funding the enemy, supplying them with resources. They want you gone, Zark. And they're willing to burn your planet to ashes to do it." The revelation sent shockwaves through the Villaran ranks. The Galactic Council, once seen as protectors of the galaxy, had betrayed them. Zark gathered his council members, their faces pale with disbelief. "This cannot be true," Yura said, her voice trembling. "The council would never do this. They are the guardians of order." Mara, standing at the edge of the room, crossed her arms. "Guardians of order. Maybe once. Now, they're just cowards in fancy robes. They see your race as weak, a liability. They want to wipe you out and blame it on the enemy. It's efficient, clean, and no one will question it." Zark's voice cut through the tension. "Whether we believe it or not, the evidence is clear. The council has turned its back on us. We must face the truth. We're alone in this fight." "No," Mara corrected, stepping forward. "You're not alone. You have us." Determined to expose the council's betrayal, Mara devised a bold plan. Infiltrate a crashed enemy ship on the outskirts of the city. If they could recover its data core, they might find irrefutable proof of the council's involvement. Kale, the young Villarin soldier, was once again assigned to Mara's team. As they prepared to leave, he approached her hesitantly. "Captain, do you really think we can win this?" "Against the council, against all of them." Mara adjusted her gear and gave him a hard look. "Kale, winning isn't about guarantees. It's about making sure you do what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you." Kale nodded, her words stirring something deep within him. The crashed enemy ship was a twisted, blackened husk half buried in the rocky terrain. Mara's team approached cautiously, their weapons drawn. The area was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint crackle of damaged electronics. Reed, the human engineer, knelt by a shattered console, his fingers dancing over the controls. "The data core is still intact, but it's encrypted. Give me 5 minutes." "You've got 2, Mara replied, scanning the perimeter. As Reed worked, the team's comms crackled with static. "Movement detected," a voice reported. "Enemy drones inbound." "Of course they know we're here," Mara muttered, raising her weapon. "Kale, cover Reed. The rest of you with me." The drones arrived in swarms, their metallic wings glinting in the pale light. The team opened fire, the air filled with the sound of energy blasts and the sharp hum of human tech. Kale, gripping his weapon tightly, fought alongside Mara, his fear gradually giving way to determination. "We're outnumbered," Kale shouted over the chaos. "Then make your shots count." Mara barked back, taking down 2 drones with precision. Finally, Reed yelled, "Got it. Cores extracted. Let's move." The team retreated under heavy fire, their path blocked by enemy reinforcements. Mara led the charge, her every move calculated and fearless. Kale found himself following her lead, his respect for the humans growing with every step. Back at the command center, the data core was decrypted. The evidence was damning. Encrypted messages, supply logs, and strategic plans all pointed to the Galactic Council's direct involvement in the invasion. The room erupted in anger and disbelief as the truth sank in. "The Council has declared war on us," Zark said, his voice heavy with anger. "But why? What do they gain from this?" "Control," Mara answered simply. "By letting your people fall, they send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Obey, or face extinction." Yira, still reeling from the revelation, looked at Mara. "And what about humanity? Why are you helping us when the galaxy has already rejected you?" Mara's expression softened, but her voice was firm. "Because we've been where you are. We've felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of being abandoned. And because, unlike the Council, we don't leave people behind." The evidence was broadcast across Vyler, rallying the people to fight back with renewed determination. But Mara knew the Council wouldn't stay silent for long. As the enemy forces prepared for their final assault, Mara stood beside Zark, gazing at the horizon. "The Council knows we have this," she said, holding up a data crystal containing the decrypted evidence. "They'll stop at nothing to destroy it. And us." Zark nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then we make our stand here. Together." Mara smirked. "Now you're starting to sound like a human." The skies over Vyler darkened as enemy ships filled the horizon. The final battle was coming, and the stakes had never been higher. For the first time in generations, the Villarans stood united, but they would need every ounce of their strength and the unrelenting determination of humanity to survive what was coming next, against all odds. The skies over Vyler burned crimson as the enemy's warships descended, blotting out the stars. The final assault had begun. Mara stood atop the command platform, her sharp green eyes scanning the chaos below. Vyleran and human soldiers scrambled to their positions, preparing for what would likely be their last stand. "This is it," Mara muttered under her breath. "Everything we've done comes down to this." Elder Zark joined her, his regal demeanor masking the storm of emotions raging within. "Our people are ready, Captain. But even with your weapons, we're outnumbered. And those Council reinforcements." He paused, his jaw tightening. "They've sent their flagship." Mara glanced at the massive silhouette looming on the horizon. The Council's flagship, a fortress in the sky, was bristling with weapons and accompanied by a fleet of smaller ships. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Good. Let them come. It'll make what we're about to do even more memorable." Down in the trenches, Kale stood shoulder to shoulder with Reed, gripping his energy rifle so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. Around them, human soldiers adjusted their shields while Villaran warriors, now equipped with human tech, practiced loading their newly acquired weapons. "This feels insane," Kale said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Welcome to humanity's favorite pastime," Reed replied with a crooked grin. "Doing the impossible." Kale looked at the humans, their faces grim yet determined. There was no fear in their eyes, only a fierce resolve. He realized that despite their reputation as outcasts, humans thrived in moments like these, when all odds were stacked against them. A shrill alarm shattered the brief moment of calm. The enemy was advancing. The battle erupted with a ferocity that shook the very ground. Enemy drones swarmed the skies, their weapons raining fire down on the defenders. Human and Villaran forces returned fire, their combined efforts creating a wall of resistance. Mara led the charge, her commands cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Focus fire on the walkers. Take out their legs," she shouted, pointing to the massive biomechanical creatures stomping toward their defenses. Kale found himself in the thick of the fight. covering Reed as the human engineer deployed a makeshift EMP device. The device sent out a pulse, disabling several enemy drones in one sweep. "You're crazy," Kale yelled as Reed laughed, ducking behind cover. "Crazy gets the job done," Reed shouted back, firing his rifle. In the command center, Zark watched the battle unfold on the holographic display. The enemy forces were relentless, but the humans' tactics were keeping them at bay. Barely. "They can't hold forever," Yura said, her voice trembling. "We're running out of time." Zark clenched his fists. "Then we must act now." The ancient weapon, the Villarin's last hope, lay hidden deep beneath the city. A relic of a forgotten age, it had been deemed too dangerous to use. But now it was their only chance. Zark made his decision. Mara's comm crackled to life. "Captain, this is Zark. The weapon is ready, but we need you to buy us more time to activate it." Mara's jaw tightened. "Understood. We'll hold the line." She turned to her troops, her voice rising above the cacophony of battle. "Listen up. We're the only thing standing between them and total annihilation. So dig deep and fight like hell." The defenders rallied, their determination surging as they pushed back against the enemy. Kale fought alongside Mara, his fear giving way to a fierce resolve. For the first time, he understood the human's indomitable spirit. Beneath the city, Zark and a team of Villarin scientists worked frantically to activate the ancient weapon. The chamber was bathed in a pale blue light as the device hummed to life, its intricate mechanisms glowing with an otherworldly energy. "What will it do?" Yura asked, her voice filled with awe and dread. Zark didn't look up. "It will unleash an energy wave powerful enough to cripple every enemy machine on the planet, but it will also drain every power source we have, including our defenses." Yura's eyes widened. "You're gambling everything on this." Zark finally turned to her, his expression resolute. "We have no choice." Above ground, the enemy unleashed their ultimate weapon, a towering war mech equipped with devastating energy cannons. The defenders' weapons barely scratched its armor, and their lines began to falter. "We can't stop that thing," Kale shouted, firing desperately at the mech. Mara gritted her teeth. "We don't need to stop it, just slow it down." She activated her comm. "Zark, we're out of time. Tell me you're ready." Zark's voice crackled through the comm. "The weapon is charging. Hold on a little longer." Mara's eyes narrowed as she looked at the mech. "We'll hold." She led a daring assault, using hit-and-run tactics to distract the mech while her troops targeted its vulnerable joints. Kale found himself charging into the fray, his fear replaced by adrenaline and sheer determination. Finally, the weapon was ready. Zark activated the ancient device, and a blinding pulse of energy erupted from the city's core. The wave swept across the battlefield, disabling every enemy machine in its path. The towering mech collapsed, its systems fried, as the remaining enemy forces scattered in disarray. The battlefield fell silent. The defenders, battered but victorious, looked around in disbelief. They had done it. Mara stood in the ruins of the battlefield, her armor scorched and her face streaked with dirt. She looked at Kale, who was still catching his breath. "Not bad for your first impossible mission," she said with a faint smirk. Kale managed a weak laugh. "I think I'm starting to understand why you humans are so stubborn." Mara's expression softened as she looked toward the horizon. "We're not stubborn, Kale. We just know what's worth fighting for." The victory had come at a great cost, but for the first time, the Villarins and humans stood united. And though the Galactic Council's shadow still loomed, they had proven that even against impossible odds, hope could prevail. Humanity's redemption. The battlefield lay in eerie silence. The enemy forces had been crippled, their massive war machines lying motionless like fallen giants. Smoke rose from the wreckage, and the faint glow of the ancient weapon's energy still lingered in the air. Villarin and human soldiers, battered and bloodied, stood together amidst the ruins. Victory, though hard-fought, came with a price. Captain Mara Cole stood at the edge of the war-torn field, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Behind her, Elder Zark approached, his violet eyes heavy with exhaustion but lit with a glimmer of hope. "We survived," Zark said, his voice quiet. "But the cost." He gestured toward the wounded and fallen scattered across the ground. "We knew the cost," Mara replied, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "The question is, was it worth it?" Zark turned to her, his expression resolute. "You've given us something we thought we'd lost forever. A chance. For that, we owe humanity more than we can ever repay." The mood inside the command center was subdued as the surviving leaders gathered. The data crystal containing proof of the Galactic Council's betrayal was displayed in the center of the room. The evidence was damning, showing encrypted communications and supply routes linking the Council directly to the enemy forces. Yura, the once skeptical Council member, studied the holographic display with a grim expression. This changes everything. If we broadcast this to the galaxy, the Council's lies will be exposed." Zark nodded. "But it will also make us a target. The Council won't sit idly by while their secrets are revealed." "That's why we need to move quickly," Mara said. "The longer we wait, the more time they have to silence us." A Villaran technician stepped forward. "We can use the planetary relay to send the data. But once we activate it, the signal will be traceable. They'll know it came from here." "Let them come," Mara said, her voice cold and determined. "We've faced them once, and we'll face them again if we have to. But this message needs to go out. The galaxy deserves to know the truth." The decision was made. The humans and Villarans worked together to prepare the broadcast. Soldiers reinforced the city's defenses, knowing that retaliation would be swift. The air was thick with tension, but also with purpose. For the first time, the Villarans truly understood the humans' relentless spirit, their refusal to back down, even when the odds were against them. Kale found himself standing beside Reed once more, helping him set up an energy shield around the relay. "Do you think they'll come for us?" Kale asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Reed smirked, adjusting a panel on the shield. "Oh, they'll come, but they won't find us sitting around waiting for a beating." Kale shook his head, a small smile forming on his lips. "You humans really are something else." "Yeah, we hear that a lot," Reed said with a chuckle. As the relay powered up, the room filled with a low hum, the holographic interface glowing brighter. Mara stood at the console, her hand hovering over the activation button. Zark stood beside her, his expression a mixture of resolve and fear. "This is it," Zark said. "Once this message goes out, there's no turning back." Mara looked at him, her eyes steady. "There was no turning back the moment we chose to fight." With a deep breath, Zark nodded. "Do it." Mara pressed the button, and the relay came to life. The data crystal's contents were transmitted across the galaxy, sent to every major communications hub, every neutral planet, every species under the Council's influence. The truth was out. On distant planets, the broadcast was received. Alien leaders watched in shock as the evidence played before them. The Council's betrayal, their secret funding of the enemy, their plan to exterminate the Villarans. Outrage spread like wildfire, as species once loyal to the Council began questioning their allegiance. Back on Vylar, the signal's success was met with quiet relief. But the moment was short-lived. An alarm blared, and a Villaran scout rushed into the room. "Elder Zark, Captain Cole, the Council's fleet is approaching. They've sent everything they have." Mara's expression hardened. "They want to make an example of us." "Fine. Let them try." The Council's fleet arrived like a storm, their massive warships casting long shadows over the city. But the defenders were ready. Human and Villaran forces stood united, their resolve unshaken despite the overwhelming odds. Mara addressed the combined troops through a comm link, her voice ringing with authority. They think they can silence us, that they can erase what we've done here. But they're wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that no matter how strong they think they are, the truth is stronger. And so are we. Her words were met with a roar of determination from the defenders. The battle that followed was fierce and chaotic. The Council's warships rained destruction down on the city, but the defenders fought back with everything they had. Villarin ingenuity combined with human resilience created a defense the Council hadn't anticipated. Gale, fighting alongside Reed once more, found himself inspired by the humans' unyielding spirit. He pushed himself harder, determined to prove that the Villarins were just as strong. As the battle raged, Mara led a daring assault on the Council's flagship. Using a stolen enemy ship, she and a small team infiltrated the massive vessel, fighting their way to the bridge. There, she confronted the Council's emissary, a cold, calculating alien who sneered at her defiance. "You think you've won," the emissary spat. "The galaxy will never side with outcasts like you." Mara's reply was a single shot from her sidearm, shattering the control console. "The galaxy doesn't need to side with us. It just needs to see the truth." With the flagship's systems crippled, the Council's fleet faltered. The defenders seized the opportunity, driving the invaders back. As the Council's ships retreated, a cheer rose from the city. Against all odds, they had held their ground. Vylar stood, not as a forgotten race, but as a beacon of defiance against tyranny. And humanity, once exiled, had proven itself as the galaxy's fiercest ally. Mara stood with Zark on the command platform, watching the enemy fleet disappear into the distance. "They'll be back," Zark said. "Let them," Mara replied. "We'll be ready." The battle was over, but the fight for justice had only just begun. The galaxy was waking up, and humanity's redemption was far from finished. A new alliance. The aftermath of the battle left Vylar, scarred but standing. The once vibrant cities bore the marks of relentless war. Crumbling towers, scorched landscapes, and skies that had only just begun to clear. Yet, amidst the devastation, there was a new sense of unity, a bond forged in the crucible of survival. Vylar and humanity had stood together against an enemy far greater than themselves, and they had won. Captain Mara Cole stood at the heart of the Villarin capital, now a makeshift command center. Around her, humans and Villarins worked side by side, tending to the wounded, rebuilding infrastructure, and sharing stories of their shared struggle. It was a sight no one had ever expected to see. Two species, so different yet so alike, united in purpose. Elder Zark addressed the gathered crowd, his voice carrying over the ruins. His people, battle-worn and weary, looked up at him with a mixture of pride and hope. "My people," he began, his tone resolute, "today, we stand not as victims, but as survivors. We have faced annihilation and emerged stronger. And we owe our survival to our new allies, the humans." He turned to Mara, who stood quietly beside him. "Captain Cole, your people came to us when no one else would. You risked everything to help us, even when the galaxy turned its back on you. For that, we are forever in your debt." Mara stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "You don't owe us anything," she said, her voice steady. "We fought because it was the right thing to do. But this fight isn't over. The Galactic Council won't forgive what we've done here. They'll come back, and they'll come for all of us. That's why we need to stand together, not just today, but for the days ahead." Her words resonated with the Villarins. For the first time, they saw the humans not as outcasts, but as kindred spirits, fighters who refused to back down, even in the face of impossible odds. As the days passed, the evidence of the Galactic Council's betrayal spread across the galaxy. The transmission from Vylar had reached every corner of known space, and the response was overwhelming. On distant worlds, species that had long lived under the Council's oppressive rule began to question their loyalty. Protests erupted, alliances crumbled, and whispers of rebellion grew louder. On Vylar, envoys from other alien species began arriving, seeking out the humans and Villarans who had dared to stand against the Council. These envoys brought offers of aid, requests for alliances, and most importantly, a willingness to defy the status quo. One such envoy, a tall reptilian creature from a race known as the Tyrannics, approached Mara and Zark during a meeting. "We've lived under the Council's thumb for centuries," the Tyrannics leader hissed. "But you have shown us that there is another way. If you will lead, we will follow." Zark glanced at Mara, his expression uncertain. "Lead? We are barely standing ourselves." Mara smiled faintly. "Leadership isn't about being unbreakable, Zark. It's about being willing to fight for what matters, even when you're broken." The decision was made. Vylar and humanity would form the backbone of a new alliance, one that rejected the tyranny of the Galactic Council and sought to create a galaxy where all species could stand as equals. It was an ambitious goal, but ambition was something humans excelled at. The Alliance's first act was to send a message back to the Council. "We will not be silenced. We will not be ruled. The galaxy is watching, and we are ready." The Council's response was swift. They issued a statement condemning the rebellion on Vylar and declared both humans and Villarans enemies of galactic peace. But their words rang hollow. The evidence of their betrayal had already taken root in the minds of countless species, and the Council's power was beginning to crack. On Vylar, preparations for the next battle were already underway. The humans shared their technology and strategies, while the Villarans offered their knowledge and resources. Together, they created a force unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, a coalition of the willing, united by a shared dream of freedom. Kale, now a seasoned soldier, stood beside Reed as they worked on a new prototype shield generator. "Do you think this will work?" Kale asked, his voice filled with a mixture of doubt and hope. Reed grinned, his ever-present optimism shining through. "It'll work. And if it doesn't, we'll figure out something else. That's the thing about humans. We don't quit." Kale chuckled, his respect for humanity now unshakable. "You're impossible. You know that." "Yeah," Reed replied with a wink. "But that's what makes us fun." As the first ships of the new Alliance fleet took to the skies, Mara and Zark watched from the command center. The fleet was small, a fraction of the Council's armada, but it was a start. "We're not ready for a full-scale war," Zark said quietly. "Maybe not," Mara replied. "But revolutions don't start with armies. They start with ideas. And right now, the galaxy has an idea that can't be killed." Zark nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "Thank you, Captain, for everything." Mara turned to him, her expression softening. "Don't thank me, Zark. We're in this together now." The story of Vylar and humanity spread across the stars, inspiring countless others to rise against oppression. The Galactic Council, once thought invincible, now faced a growing rebellion it couldn't contain. And at the heart of it all were two unlikely allies, humans and Villarans, who had dared to defy the odds and fight for something greater than themselves. The galaxy was changing, and this time, it would be on their terms. As the fleet disappeared into the void, Captain Mara Cole smiled to herself. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't in years: hope.